My name is Derek. I am 76 years old. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, it seems to me that it is not me standing in front of me, but the shadow of the man I once was. My eyes are still the same, gray, cold, observant. But my gaze no longer has the power it once had in negotiations, decisions, and orders. Now that gaze stops no one. It is ignored, like an old stain on the wall that someone forgot to paint over. I live on the outskirts of a small town, in a modest house with peeling stairs. 10 years ago, I painted those stairs myself, tightened the screws, replaced the tiles in the bathroom. And now I silently step on the old boards that creak with every step. Not as a sign of life, but rather as a reminder. You're still here, Derek. You haven't disappeared yet. My children, both of them, are successful. That's how they like to describe themselves. They have offices, expensive cars, managers, planners. Every day is scheduled down to the minute. But there is no place for their father in this schedule. I'm not offended, I just notice. They only call when they need legal advice or to remind me about some paperwork in my name. Once my son said, "You understand, Dad. Things are complicated for us right now. Business, markets, time." Of course I understand. Who else but me should understand markets and business? My grandchildren. They don't know me. They only know my Wi-Fi when they come to visit. They look at their screens, not into my eyes. I try to tell them something about the past, about how I used to go fishing with their father, how we slept under the open sky, how we once got stuck in the mountains without any communication. But they're not interested. They nod their heads, saying, "Yes, Grandpa." But at that very moment, their fingers are already typing to someone in a chat room. I am background noise. In the store, the saleswoman, a young girl with colored nails, doesn't even look me in the eye. Her "anything else?" sounds like an automatic script. She doesn't see me as a person, just another pensioner with a bag of buckwheat and the cheapest bread. At the hospital, a young doctor flips through my file as if he's reading a report on a malfunction in the air conditioning system. His "well, what do you want at your age?" hits deeper than any diagnosis. And I don't want anything anymore. Just to feel that I still exist, that my body is not just a carrier of pills, but my fortress, which has endured so much. The days drag on silently. I wake up early. I make myself some porridge. I sit by the window. I watch young people running for the bus, mothers dragging their children to school, dogs gnawing at trash cans. And I sit, and I am silent, and I remember. In the evening, I turn on the TV, although I don't listen to it. Just noise, just something alive. Sometimes I get up at night, sit at the table and look at an old photo album. My late Martha smiles there, so young, so alive. She always said, "You are strong, Derek. People listen to you because you don't shout, you speak the truth." But now no one listens, and I'm starting to rot from the inside. It doesn't hurt, it just disappears. My skin, my joints, that's one thing. But when it rots inside, it's a different kind of death. And it's not instantaneous. It's slow. It's silent. And no one notices. Something else is growing inside me. Not anger. Not yet. But resentment. Deep, heavy, sticky. Clings to my thoughts. It whispers at night. "You're still here. You remember." I keep a diary. For myself. Not for publication. It doesn't contain plans, recipes, or medical records. Just phrases, names, dates, facial expressions. Little things that someone said, thinking I couldn't hear. But I heard, and I wrote it down. They say old age is a golden autumn. My autumn is black, and winter hasn't come yet. But the wind is already breaking the branches. I used to be different, and these aren't just words. People feared me. They listened to me. They listened to what I had to say and didn't interrupt me. People stand up when power enters the room. That's how it was with me back then. I remember how it all started. I was a nobody, a kid from a damp apartment in an industrial neighborhood. My mother was a nurse. My father disappeared into a drinking binge when I was 16. I had no friends, but I was hungry. Hungry for a different life, where you don't depend on social assistance, where you don't wake up to the sounds of your neighbor's drunken quarrels, where you are your own master. I started with night shifts at the market. Then I worked part-time in repair crews. I slept 4 hours a night. And then I went all in. My first business was dirty and honest at the same time. I cleaned basements. I crawled around in the mud and removed rats. But I earned money, and I invested it. In a cleaning company, in security services, in my own office. At 35, I already had 3 partners, a warehouse in the city center, and over 40 people working for me. They all called me Mr. Derek. No one asked where I came from. Everyone saw what I had become. Martha. My Martha. She didn't see me as a businessman. She saw me as a person. And she was the only one who reminded me that I had a heart. Strength is when you can destroy but you don't, she said. Strength is restraint. And I restrained myself. Often. I could have swallowed up a competitor. But I negotiated. I could have exposed a dishonest employee. But I gave them a chance. I could have ruined a debtor. But I waited. Because I believed there was still something in people. My children grew up in the comfort I had fought for with my blood. I paid for their clubs, their education, their travels. I wasn't with them as often as I wanted to be. But I was there. I was their source. They said, "Dad will take care of everything." And I always did. I stopped creditors, bought new apartments, even delayed summonses because I knew the right people. And then everything started to go downhill. Not right away. First, silently. Marta got sick. And in 2 years, she burned out like a candle. I still hear her last words, "You are strong." When the night squeezes my chest. After her death, I walked away. I sold my business. I gave everything I had to my children. I thought I deserved peace and quiet. They thought I had lost my mind. And gradually, day by day, I became superfluous. I still tried to give them advice. But my son laughed. "Dad, your methods are from the 90s. We live differently now." I didn't argue. Why? I just watched. I saw what I had built being destroyed. Not physically, mentally. They destroyed the spirit. The business I had created turned into a sterile machine with a sign. Without honor. Without a face. And I kept quiet. I kept quiet when I wasn't invited to meetings. I kept quiet when my grandson said, "Who cares about you now?" I kept quiet when my daughter's friend whispered to someone during lunch. Another old man who can't let go of his youth. But I remembered everything. Because memory is my last power. In my silence, I still saw those first contracts. Those sleepless nights. Marta's tears. Those bleeding calluses. And I asked myself, why have I become useless? I was a source. And now I'm a spent resource. Once I was armor. Now I'm just a shell. But there's something else. Something that hasn't disappeared. Not with age. Not with loss. Not with contempt. My ability to remember. To analyze. To plan. They forgot who I was. But I didn't. In old age, it is not the body that hurts, it is the attitude. The bones creak in the joints, but the real crunch is not in the fingers, but in the soul. When they hint that you are superfluous. Without words. Just with a glance, silence, a quick click of the door. I have learned to live alone. I buy my own groceries. I cook for myself. I clean up after myself. My daughter promised several times, "We'll hire someone to help you, Dad." But the promise got lost somewhere between her meetings, watching TV series, and personal growth courses. I didn't ask for anything. But recently I took a chance. My leg had been cramping for 3 days, and I couldn't walk properly. I called my son and said, "Please come. I need to go to the doctor." He was silent for a long time, then said, "Dad, I can't today. Give me the information, the bank will call me. It's urgent. I can't do it myself." "Well, call a taxi. I'm not a free ambulance, seriously." And at that moment, something inside me settled. It didn't break. It didn't explode. It just fell. Like an old branch that the wind had tiredly thrown aside. I went by myself. The driver was young. He looked at his phone without looking back. The smell was pungent. Some cheap air freshener mixed with sweat. I was silent. In the reception room, The doctor looked at me over his shoulder without getting up from his chair. Age? 76. Ah. Well, that's old. Any pain? In my leg? And pressure on the left side. Well, take the same pills. At your age, there's nothing you can do. At your age. It became a refrain, a verdict, a license for indifference. After that incident, I didn't call my children anymore. I learned to be silent. But the world didn't stop showing me who I was now, and that I was nothing to it. Once I was sitting on a bench near my house. The weather was clear and sunny. On the bench next to me, some 16-year-old boys were giggling, smoking vapes, and listening to loud music on their phones. I asked them to turn down the volume a little, and heard in response, "What, Grandpa? Do your ears hurt? Go to sleep, your time is up." "I'm not sleeping. I'm still alive." "Well, die quietly like all old people," one of them said, without even looking me in the eye. I looked at them as if they were wolf cubs raised in a cage without a wolf. They didn't see strength, and they didn't know what responsibility was. They only saw weakness, and they laughed. But the worst thing happened a few days ago. I left the store. My hands were full, heavy bags of groceries. It started to rain, suddenly cold, piercing. I was shivering. I stepped on a slippery tile and slipped. The bags fell, apples rolled out of them. I crouched down, trying to pick everything up, and then I looked around. 2 women were standing nearby, young, umbrellas in their hands. Their eyes were contemptuous. One said to the other, "Look how they're rotting, these old people, clinging to life like it's their last crumb. And they're still climbing somewhere. They should stay at home instead of getting in the way," added the other. I didn't ask for much. Just a hand, a glance, a human "Are you okay?" But instead I heard laughter. My vision blurred. It wasn't because of tears. It was something else. Dark, thick, old, like a swamp that you step into carelessly, and it pulls you in. I got up by myself, picked up the apples, thanked no one, and went home, silently. Each step was like a blow to a dead ember. At home, I stood by the window for a long time. The silence was no longer emptiness. It trembled. It breathed. It whispered. I went to the closet. I took out an old notebook, yellowed, dusty. On the first page was written in my handwriting 40 years ago, "Remember everyone, and be ready to return." I opened a new page. I wrote the date, names, place, rain, words, everything, in detail, clearly. I underlined in red, "I have not forgotten." That night I did not go to sleep. I sat in silence. And in that silence something was born. Not anger, not pain, but determination. The one they despised was gone. But another one woke up. The one who remembers how to control people, how to manipulate systems, how to destroy, silently. I will not shout. I will act. The game has begun. Every man has his limits. For some, they are thin, barely perceptible, crossed accidentally, with a joke, a glance, indifference. For others, they are thick, armored, forged by decades of patience. But even armor has cracks. And when darkness seeps in, everything that was good dies. For a long time, I lived in fear of becoming useless to anyone. But now everything has changed. I am no longer afraid. I am watching. I woke up before dawn. Not from old age insomnia, no. But from a clear, crystal clear feeling that everything had fallen into place. On the table is a notebook. Smooth, open. It already has 15 pages. Names, dates, words, events. Every instance of indifference, contempt, arrogance. I recorded everything, not for emotion, for structure. I started writing a new list, not of victims, opportunities, influential acquaintances from the past, a lawyer who once saved my competitor from bankruptcy, a security guard whose job I once saved, an accountant who, over a bottle of vodka, will tell you who's hurting. I planned everything, every step, every manipulation. This won't be revenge in the literal sense. No, I'm not a barbarian. This will be a game, and I am its author. My son was the first. I sent him a letter from a bank address I created through a VPN. It contained an anonymous complaint from an employee reporting that the firm was involved in tax fraud. I knew that they were currently in a tender and that any shadow of suspicion would be a failure. I specified the exact dates, amounts, and names of people who had once worked with me. 2 days later, an audit began at the company. My son called me, but I didn't answer. I sat on the porch and drank tea. Calmly, slowly. Cold retribution does not require noise. Then my grandson. I knew where he spent his time. I saw how often he posted photos from his influencer life. I created a fake account. I gained the trust of his friends. And one day I published an old story about how he participated in bullying a classmate. With video, with evidence. It was recorded back when the child's mother called me, asking to talk to my grandson. But I was told, don't get involved. I remembered. When the scandal broke out, the grandson closed his account. Several commercial partnerships were removed from it. And then he wrote in the family chat, "Grandpa, are you still there?" I didn't answer. He is just beginning to feel what I live every day. The third was a doctor who had once ignored me. I knew where she worked, and through an old acquaintance, a journalist, I reported her for misconduct. They came to investigate. She was temporarily suspended. I knew she wasn't guilty of anything serious. But knowing doesn't mean forgiving. And so on. I didn't break them, I bent them. I didn't kill them, I put them in front of a mirror. I didn't destroy them, I forced them to see what they had become. My every step was calculated. Without unnecessary emotion. Everyone thought they were being pursued by bad luck. But it was me. The one they despised. The one who was no longer a grandfather with trembling hands, but a hunter lurking in the shadows. And you know what? For the first time in years, I began to breathe, not out of malice, but out of a sense of justice. Because no one had the right to trample on what I had built. No one had the right to say that my time was up. My time had only just begun. Because I had learned to be invisible. And invisibility is the best tool for change. And now, every night, I walk past the mirror and see not a shadow. I see a gaze, the same one, from the old days, cold, strong, strategic, the gaze of someone who will no longer allow it, and will never forget. The highest form of revenge is when no one suspects that you did anything. Not because you hid it, but because you are already above them. You are not their equal. You are their memory, their fear, their lost why. I finished the game like a chess master who left the board before checkmate. The pieces fell by themselves. After the story with my grandson and checking with my son, a crack began to form in our family. It grew every day. My son accused my daughter of leaking information. She accused him of indifference towards his father. I just threw in a few anonymous messages, innocent but very apartment. A subtle hint. Your brother talked about you in such and such circles. Your sister signed the documents without consultation. Silent conflicts are the deepest, because no one knows where it started. And I knew. I started it. My grandson started looking for support, but he was met with silence. His friends turned away. I knew how social isolation works in the digital age. I didn't break him. I just left him alone with himself. And he couldn't take it. One evening, he sent me a text message. I don't know how to go on. I'm ashamed. I'm sorry. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, because words mean nothing if a person never listened to you when you were alive. My daughter, she never betrayed me directly. She just allowed neglect to happen. Indifference is consent, a passive form of betrayal. I created a situation in which she lost an important partner. He found out that she had signed contracts in the past for companies that were controlled by my fund. Back in my day. It wasn't a crime, but it destroyed trust. She came. For the first time in months. She sat down. Her hands were shaking. Tears in her eyes. Dad, what did I do wrong? I was silent, because she was finally asking. Others also got it. The saleswoman who always ignored me was removed from her position due to complaints of unethical behavior. I myself incited several pensioners to make these complaints. The doctor left the hospital after the publication of an anonymous article about indifference in medicine. It was my article, written at night with facts that I had once silently collected. And me? I watched silently and learned to breathe in a new way. My home, which used to be empty, was now filled with control. Not with happiness, not with love, but with order. And that is also strength. I opened my old laptop. I started writing my memoirs. Not for publication. For myself. To record. This is what happens when you think that old age is weakness. My neighbors started to notice me. One guy even said hello. Good afternoon, Mr. Derek. How are you? That simple question fell on my ears like honey on my throat after a long cough. I'm fine, I replied. And I really was. No one applauds me. No one hugs me. No one says thank you to me. But no one despises me anymore. Now I know old age is not the end. It is the beginning of a new kind of strength. Silent, cold, merciless to indifference. I didn't want to destroy. I wanted to be remembered. And remembered well. By everyone. Everyone who caused me a little death got their little hell. I became not a victim. I became a mirror. Now that the dust has settled, I can see the results of my silence. They are not celebrations. There are no loud speeches, no flowers. Instead, there is something else. Serious, practical attention. This is exactly what I wanted, to be noticed not as a joke during coffee breaks, not as an old name in a family chat, but as a person whose presence matters. It is not the weight of joy, but of responsibility. My children finally call more often, not with gratitude, but with concern. My daughter came for a few days, stayed up all night reading my old letters, my notes, my old photos. She stood by the window and said quietly, "How could I not see?" My son, who once considered me a relic, turned to me for advice, not as a consul, but as a person with experience. He was ashamed. He was hurt by his own inaction. We spoke little, but the words were more important than the previous years of false busyness. My grandson returned. Not smooth, not with the fake smiles of partnerships, but devastated. He learned to lose and pay for his mistakes. When he came to me, there was no pride in his eyes, but a kind of childlike enlightenment. We sat for a long time. I listened, sometimes sprinkling irony, sometimes silent. He asked for advice. I gave it. These are simple things. How to keep your word, how to answer for your actions, how to build trust. Perhaps these lessons came too late, but they are real. Society also reacted. Those who had previously turned away became more attentive. Their eyes no longer slid over me like over an old facade. I saw how a person who once whispered, "The old are rotting," now walks down a different staircase with a different look. Interested, attentive. The local pharmacist, who once didn't even raise her voice when I asked for medicine, now loudly offers help to elderly customers. Is this a victory? Perhaps it is a small compensation. But it exists and it cannot be taken away. I did not burn these people's lives. I made them see their reflection in the mirror I held in front of them. The mirror does not beg. It shows. And that's all they see, their own features, their past decisions, their silences. Some cry. Some break down. Some wrap themselves in protection and take revenge in the opposite direction. I don't control the outcome any further. I gave them a start. The rest is their life. Do I feel victorious? Yes. Not because I got what I deserved, but because I regained the right to be heard. When my ears were filled with criticism, I didn't respond with shouting. I responded with a system. Not with my hand, but with my mind. Not with scars, but with consequences. And in these consequences, people began to treat each other differently, me each other. Respect returned like a subtle but steady wave. Did I destroy anyone? No. Some lives were disrupted. Some careers faltered. Some relationships were ruined. I saw those who despised me end up in the darkness of their own conscience. It hurts. But why does it hurt, if not because they were not worthy of any other payment? My task was not to torture. My task was to teach. And teaching often comes through pain. I have changed. Something in me died, something was born. I used to see myself as a defender, a man of honor who sheathes his sword when necessary. Now I am a different kind of defender, colder and more calculating. I have learned not to forgive just like that. Not because I want punishment, but because recognizing my worth requires people to take responsibility. And yes, sometimes the best way to teach others respect is to show them that there are consequences. My body is still old. My hands still shake sometimes. My joints ache. But my mind is clear. I am learning to appreciate every morning when I wake up and see that there is still a day to do things. Not noisy, quiet, sharp, smart. And if someone asks me if it was worth crossing that line, I will simply answer, yes. Because when your life is spent supporting others, you have the right to demand that this support not be used as a stepping stone. I did not commit the first evil. I only reflected their indifference to themselves. In the evening, I sit down at the table. I take my diary. The lines from my notes still smell of ink. I flip through the pages. There are names, dates, details. There is the trajectory of my silence and movement. And I know, this is not a festive story. This is the story of a person who is learning to live in a world where values are forgotten. I write the last entry, not for my daughter, not for my grandson, not for those I have hurt or forced to look in the mirror. This entry is for myself. A motivational phrase to keep me clear-headed when the shadows try to drive me back into weightlessness. The last entry in my diary. Don't lose your voice, even when others can't hear it. Remember, quiet actions have power, and dignity is the greatest revenge. Live so that your silence is heavier than their words. I close my notebook, turn off the light, and go to the window. The moon hangs like a cold witness. I raise a cup of tea to my lips and swallow the warmth. Foam in response to life. And somewhere, in the echo of my own silence, I smile, quietly, without loud gestures. It was a long game, and I learned to win it without shouting.
Subscribe and like, and send the video to your friends.